welcome to Open Stutter. My name is Mark.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Bill.
So we're excited to have this conversation with Bill. Bill, would you like to introduce yourself for those who don't know you?
Sure. My name is Bill Gale. I'm 61 years old. I have stuttered all my life. I know Mark and Ben through a group therapy that we went through about a decade ago. And let me stop there for the moment.
What do you do for work, Bill?
I'm an economist. I work at the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C. I specialize in tax policy and fiscal policy.
And what's your favorite flavor of ice cream?
Chocolate. No question. Some version of chocolate. Maybe hazelnut chocolate.
Nice. So I kind of thinking we could kind of I would love to hear about your story with your stuttering, Bill. So I'm thinking just to open-ended, like if you could sort of take us through your relationship with your stuttering throughout your lifetime, and you're welcome to take that wherever.
All right, thanks. I love the construct of thinking about stuttering as my relationship with stuttering. I've never thought of it that way, actually. I've stuttered all my life. My first memory is my grandfather telling me to spit it out when I think I was around 4. Stuttered through elementary school, took a public speaking class in high school, did Model UNs in high school, did a variety of different therapies. This is way back in the 1960s and 1970s. And the stuttering went up and down as various parts of my life got more stressful or less stressful. I won't bore you with all the details, except that as an economist, I sometimes speak on TV. I've stuttered on national TV. I've stuttered in congressional testimony. I've stuttered in meetings with the Treasury Secretary. I mean, it's just part of my life. The thing that changed when it changed was when I was about 50, I got a divorce, and that was a big growth period for me personally. One of the things I did through a variety of connections was get connected to this group therapy that Viviansisskin ran, that Mark and Ben and I were all in. And there were, I think, 3 things in the group therapy that had a transformational effect on me. The first was learning that there was this concept of a person who stutters, capital P, capital W, capital S. And that all of a sudden, instead of trying to hide my identity, I suddenly had an identity. I was a person who stuttered. I had never thought of it that way. I mean, I thought about stuttering all the time, but I had never had that idea placed in front of me. When I did, it clicked. It was like, oh yeah, of course, I'm a person who stutters. The second thing was being part of the group, and not just seeing that there were other people besides me that stuttered, but hearing everybody's story. As we all know, there's shame associated with stuttering. At least I felt a lot of shame associated with stuttering. And when I looked around the room at this group, I saw people who were wonderful people, great people who were striving to overcome this obstacle. And it occurred to me one day, literally just sort of a light bulb when I was driving home after this therapy. If those people are good people working to overcome this, why aren't I a good person trying to overcome this? What do I have to be ashamed of? And so that was a kind of another kind of mental transformation I went through. And the third thing was I didn't do their exercises like some people in the group, would wait till the bus door opened and put their foot on the bottom step and then ask the driver a question, and that would force them to ask it and would force the driver to listen. I never did that, but what I did do was explicitly tell people, maybe 5 or 10 people, that, hey, I am a person who stutters. And the universal response that I got was a more colorful version of "I know that." And those three things: the identification as a person who stutters, the telling people as a person who stutters, and being part of the group. Just for me, those were transformational, and they seem to coincide with changes in what, Mark, you aptly called my relationship with stuttering. Uh, uh, the other thing, or a thing I learned in the group, though, is that everybody follows their own path. Everybody has some things that resonate with them and help them, and some things, that don't. And so, like, I wouldn't try to prescribe. I wouldn't say, oh, you must do these three things to try to address stuttering. I'm just saying those are the three things that I think help me. And like, I'm pretty fluent tonight, but we know fluency is a fair weather friend, and it comes and goes. And I've come to accept that, and basically not to be bothered by it. I mean, I don't love it, but it doesn't invoke shame anymore. It helps other people understand who I am, and uh, how people respond to it tells you about them, not about you. And just for me, I was talking to another stutterer a couple of weeks ago. I organized a session on economists who stutter for the American Economic Association meetings about a month ago. And I was talking to one of the people there, and she said that she didn't wish that she had never stuttered, because it helped shape who she was at that point. And I guess that's right. It's sort of it's part of who I am, and coming to accept that, paradoxically, I think has helped, has changed my relationship with stuttering. I'm sorry, I just love that expression. So that's my story.
So you talked about stuttering and all of these higher feared, or at least for people who aren't usually in these situations. I think they would, for a lot of people, be higher feared. Stuttering on television and in congressional hearings. How did you handle that pre your therapy experiences and meeting people who stutter?
I hated it. When you're trying to convey to someone that you're an expert on an issue and they should listen to you, it's not ideal to not be able to say your name, right? But now again, it's just like, I'm an economist I'm a person who stutters. So if you want my opinion, you gotta take the stutter with the economic knowledge. But it was hard. I mean, it was, I was stubborn about it. I mean, like I mentioned, I took public speaking. I did Model UNs. After graduate school, I became a professor, so I had to lecture. It's like I'm not sure if I consciously thought about it in terms of stuttering, but in retrospect, I was constantly kind of like hitting up against, trying to push push back against that situation, and nothing particularly worked. I mean, nothing particularly worked until I went to group therapy and had those changes that I mentioned earlier. And yeah, work. That's kind of a loaded term. I learned much more about stuttering, and that made it kind of a concrete, kind of tangible, understandable thing, rather than this mysterious thing that afflicted me. And so I think just learning about it, I should add that just learning about it helped me. I always like to understand things, and so I think I would add that to another kind of factor that helped me adjust my situation.
Yeah. That makes me think of, I remember once I was driving home from work, I was listening to NPR, I think, and they said your name, and so I was like, oh, cool, and then you started speaking, and I think I heard you stutter a couple times, like, oh, and I was cheering you on from my car.
Yeah, radio seems to be okay with kind of short delays, because people speak at different speeds and anyway, and it's sort of a natural cadence. TV hates it. There was one time I stuttered on TV. I didn't notice till afterwards, but it was like a news show, and I stuttered, and apparently they dropped a graph down in front of me like an instant after I stuttered. And so that happens. But yeah, radio is much easier than TV because you can't see it on the radio.
Yeah, and when I hear you talking about what helped you the most, I'm thinking it sounds like a lot of it was sort of embracing your identity as somebody who stutters, whereas in the past it was something you tried to stuff away, and then you were sort of introduced to this new way of interacting with it, and it's like, oh yeah, like I stutter, and I can either choose to try to like fight against it and suppress it, or embrace it. And it sounds like you chose to embrace it.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's I fought the acknowledgement. I tried to repress it. I tried to hide it from people. I think for the first 50 years of my life, and I think that spills over into other aspects of life. I think it's sort of like you've got this deep dark secret that you don't want anyone to know about. At least that's how I felt. I wanted to, and in essence, what I was doing was hiding the true me from other people, friends and colleagues and whatever. And uh, I've never proven this, but it seems to me if you're doing that in one area, one big area of your life, your kind of self-identification, then it's easier to do it in other areas. And that seems like a very unhealthy tendency. And that's why I mentioned that when I started speech therapy was after a divorce, when like all my assumptions, all my relationship with the world, not just with stuttering, was just undergoing vast changes. I don't think, I want to be clear, I'm totally not blaming anyone or my ex-wife for the fact that I stuttered. I stuttered all my life. But moving forward in life, I think, helped uh, uh, the change in relationship to stuttering was part of like a vast sea change in my relationship with everyone and everything, and so that was I had 2 or 3 years where I just felt like my relationship with the whole world was changing, and then things settled down a bit. But you're right. I fought for years, and I think that had I think that's sort of a formation of a bad habit, or at least for me, it was formation of a bad habit, and I feel like I've gotten out of that. And to be clear, the bad habit is not stuttering; it was trying to hide the stutter.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like too that you, when you got to therapy and started meeting other people who stutter and hearing other people who stutter experiences, that your choices opened up a little bit. I think a lot of us, we only know what our experience has been. So if you sort of grew up your whole life fighting against stuttering or trying to hide stuttering or minimize it and pushing it away, I'm guessing that no one ever told you that it was okay to stutter, that you didn't know that that was a path that you could take.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Certainly no one ever told me it was okay to stutter. After I started a group therapy, I talked to my younger sister about it, and she told me that it was never discussed at home, like with the parents or my sisters, that it was like the implicit thing she was saying was that it was such an awful thing that people couldn't even talk about. And I think she's right. I didn't have a recollection that we never talked about it, but since I was trying to suppress it anyway, that would not, that's not surprising. But yeah, there was after I'd gone through this big transformation with the relationship with stuttering, I talked extensively with my sisters about it, older sister, younger sister. And they had very explicit memories, which I think I have just suppressed, of me stuttering and of awkward situations that created. I mean, at my bar mitzvah, I stuttered on my Torah portion. I mean, I knew that portion. I had studied it intensely, but I stuttered on it, and you know, the fact that I remember that 48 years later is telling.
Yeah, it makes me think that like it's really helpful to simply talk about stuttering.
Yeah, sunlight is the best disinfectant, or whatever that expression is. Just getting it out there, acknowledging that it's an issue. I just found it again in group or talking with friends. I just found it. I find it so comforting, nurturing to talk about it. Like this is going to sound strange, but I really like it when friends come to me and say, "Hey, you know, my child is stuttering. What should I do?" And you know, they don't get a 1 minute answer; they get a 25-minute answer. Uh, but yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right, Mark. Just talking about it is so important.
Yeah,
Again, because there's the secrecy and shame component to it, which I just think is poisonous. And uh, uh, so yeah, so opening up, you know, acknowledging it is really, for me, it was a huge step. Maybe for other people it's not, and other steps are important. But for me, just acknowledging it, you know, being out in the open, you know, was a big deal. And like I said earlier, everyone who I knew fairly well knew that I stuttered. It was no secret, just no one ever talked about it. And so, yeah, just the power of acknowledgement for me was huge.
yeah, and it's just like a self-reinforcing cycle because like you feel shame, so other people don't feel comfortable talking about it, and because other people seem like they're not comfortable with it, you don't feel comfortable talking about it with them. So it's just like we talk about this conspiracy of silence, um,
Uh-huh.
which, as you mentioned, and I totally agree with, is sort of toxic, and it can just be consuming to a point where it's like you feel trapped. And like Ben said, I think it's like really like when you realize you have options, like it sounds like for the three of us, we never really knew that it was an option to just talk about stuttering, stutter, like show our stuttering and like be all right with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And the toxic was the word I was trying to think of uh, earlier. And so you're right about the conspiracy of silence. The other thing I mention is uh, for people who are listening to people who stutter, it's important to maintain eye contact. I know that when I'm stuttering and someone looks away, that kind of triggers negative reactions, right? And oh, you know, I'm doing something that they can't bear to watch. That makes me feel bad. That makes me stutter more, etc. And uh, uh, one of the things that I do say to people who know people who stutter is, you know, maintain eye contact and let them talk. But I think the natural thing is to turn away. And for a non-stutterer, the natural thing is to turn away, and that doesn't create a healthy dynamic in my view.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I know, I'm sure Mark's gotten these questions a lot. You've probably gotten these questions too. I feel like one of the question that I get maybe most often from parents of kids who stutter, or just from, you know, friends, family, people in the community, is what am I supposed to do? when my kid or when someone is talking to me, what am I supposed to do? If I look at them, is that going to make them feel more uncomfortable? But no, yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that.
Yeah.
You talked about telling people that you stutter. What was that like for you at first?
The first couple of times it was scary. You say, like you've just played tennis with someone and you're sitting in the chair after the match and, recounting the match and just chatting, and you say something like, by the way, there's something I want to tell you. I'm a person who stutters, and recently I've been going to uh, uh, therapy, a group therapy, and it's been really helpful to me. And I just wanted you to be aware of that. And that's you would think that would be a really easy thing to say. It's just you're just sharing something about yourself because the subject is so laden with emotions. It was really hard, and I had to like kick myself to get myself to do it sometimes. And I only did it like maybe 6 or 10 people, and even so, it was extraordinarily helpful. I mean, no one said, "Oh my gosh, you stutter?" I had no idea, and so there's just this relief about getting something about yourself that, like Mark was saying earlier, just conspiracy of silence, just the relief about eliminating that conspiracy of silence. So they then know that they can talk about it, right? And most of the time when I said that, they would say, yeah, I know. And then the conversation would just naturally evolve into something we would talk about a little bit. Like one of the people I said this to was a friend of mine who's been a friend of mine since elementary school. And he immediately said, yeah, I know. I remember you stuttering in elementary school, as far back as elementary school. And that got into that led to a conversation about the therapy I went through, and he and I did model UNs together, and we ended up talking about it for like a half an hour, and that was just great. It was like it's a bond that connects you to other. Talking about it is a bond that connects you to other people, and that's a really good feeling. But it was scary to do. It was this sort of taking a step off a cliff into abyss and having faith that someone was going to catch you, basically. But once I did it a few times, it was easier because I developed my shtick about how to say it. And after 6 to 10 times, I don't remember exactly how many, but it wasn't more than 10. I felt like I had internalized the benefit of doing that. So like, I don't need to run around and tell everyone I know that I stutter. Most people don't care and they can figure it out. But I did stuff like, it's on my Facebook profile. It's on my bio, my work bio. You describe everything you've done, and then you say, he's a tennis player and has 2 grown children and lives in Virginia. And I just added, and he's a person who stutters. And just having it out there, it ends up converting it from a source of shame to a source of strength. I mean, I kind of want to post like, I am a person who stutters, damn it, and I felt like once I owned it, it became an asset to me. It made me, there's a saying, that which does not kill you, make you stronger. I feel like it made me stronger to acknowledge it. Although it didn't feel like it was going to at first. It was scary.
Yeah, I love that phrase, like converting it from a source of shame to a source of strength, like being proud of who you are.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I think for me, like telling others that I stutter, I had a very similar experience to you, Bill. That was like some of the hardest things I ever did was like having these conversations. And I think like one reason it was super helpful for me is because stuttering was something I like ran away from for so long. And I sort of like had this narrative that if I stutter in this way or tell others, if others know that I stutter, the walls are just going to come crashing down and it's just going to be this horrible thing, right? And so actually having evidence of that not happening, like telling friends and family and strangers that I stutter and seeing their reactions of just like like it's nothing, like okay, like we already know that. Or if it's somebody who they don't know it, it was most of the time like okay. And
Yeah, and no one says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't be your friend anymore," or "I'm sorry, I don't like you anymore." In fact, it's just the opposite. You've established this connection with this person. You've told them something important about you. That it's both important and it's not. It's not. I am a criminal or something like that. It's just it's not a negative thing. It's just this is part of me, and yeah, it's we talk about what's the expression, sensitivity, like people block like I do because they don't want to hear the stutter, right? And so the lesson is to open stutter, to move the speech forward rather than move the speech forward like that. But I think there's a mental thing that goes on too, that there's the equivalent of sensitivity, like essentially acknowledgement. You have to acknowledge to yourself first that you're a person who stutters before you can acknowledge to anybody else. And it may be that first step is even harder than the second step.
Yeah. I think when you were telling these people in your life that you stutter, did you think that most of them knew?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I've known, these are people I've known, my sisters certainly knew, my girlfriend, now wife, knew, the guy that I had known since elementary school, he knew. It was harder to tell, it was harder to tell work, people that I knew through work, than it was to tell family and friends. And I'm not quite sure why, but uh, that was harder. But again, the reaction was the same. It's like, yeah, I know, I've heard your speeches. Is that nobody said yes, no? They all use more colloquial terms, and uh, yeah. Then after about 10 people, like I said, I feel like I told the people that were closest to me, and I got the benefit from that, and that was good.
Yeah, one one thing you said, Bill, is it's often appreciated from the person you're sharing it with, right? And I think that's really cool, and I couldn't agree more. And I think, in a way, stuttering is a gift like that, because it sort of like opens the door to like deeper connection and like vulnerability. And I think that's like how relationships develop and grow. So I appreciated you saying that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that totally. But 15 years ago, that idea had never occurred to me. And I often wonder, like, if I had been presented with this stuff earlier in life, if I would have been able to respond to it, or if I needed to get to a certain point in life where I was able to respond. So, and obviously I'll never know, but there.
What do you think?
I don't know. I think generally, I had to take the path that I did, and I honestly don't know that I would have been able to respond to it as positively 25 years earlier. I mean, it'd be nice to think, oh yeah, I would have, but there's almost everything in life where I looking back and say, wow, if I knew then what I know now, life would have been a lot easier. But that's not how life works, you know. So I would love to think that I could have absorbed this stuff in my 20s or teens, but I don't think I was in, you know, honestly, when I look at it, I don't think I was ready. I was, you know, mature enough or experienced enough to make that leap at that point.
Yeah, and again, like circling back, it's like we really don't know, because that wasn't even like an option to us at that time, right? So like Ben said, like when you're presented with options, you can respond differently. One thing I wanted to ask, you mentioned talking about your stuttering was like some of the hardest thing you ever, some of the hardest stuff you've ever done. Do you have advice for people who stutter, who would like to be more open and would like to share that part of them with others, but are struggling to?
So I found it very helpful to like prepare what I was actually going to say. And in particular, when I described it earlier, I told people I was a person who stuttered, and then I immediately added, I've been going to therapy, you know, for the last 6 months or year or whatever, precisely so the conversation didn't end with, I am a person who stutters. I wanted to like just keep the conversation going, say something more, but give them something to grab onto. So I didn't just say, I'm a person who stutters, and then we just stared at each other, you know, nobody saying anything. But I found it helpful to have a sense of pretty much exactly what I was going to say and how I was going to say it. And I didn't adhere to, I'm sure I deviated from the planned comments, but thinking about it in advance and being being purposeful about it was for me at least was helpful. I didn't want, the pressure of ad-libbing on top of the pressure of actually saying this was just more than I wanted to deal with. I kind of wanted to know what my next two steps were going to be, basically.
You mentioned earlier that you wanted to put on your profile or your Facebook page, I'm a person who stutters. Damn it. And I'm curious. What do you say that you're proud of being a person who stutters now?
Why do I say it, or
what do you say that you're proud of being a person who stutters now?
It's just part of me, and I for the things Mark and I were discussing, and sort of the avoiding the conspiracy of silence, connecting with people, and internally just acknowledging that this is who I am. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like something, I have two kids. When the kids were young, we used to say, if everyone's alive at the end of the day, it was a successful day, right? And I feel a little bit like that with stuttering. If I get through the day being a stutterer, that's a successful day. And so that makes me proud of it. And it's not that I'm perfect, but that I faced obstacles and I dealt with it.
Yeah. Speaking of that, how do you think stuttering stacks up in like the significance of obstacles you've overcome in your life?
Wow. I mean, I think I think it may well be the biggest. That I wouldn't say I've overcome it. I've addressed it. I've acknowledged it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if you're a person who stutters, you're always a person who stutters, even if you're having a good day and the words are coming out fine. I certainly identify myself as a person who stutters. Occasionally someone will say to me, "Oh, you don't stutter." And I'll say, "Yes, I do." And, you just haven't heard it. But I don't feel like it's overcoming one of that I think that's too strong. I think I read somewhere that stuttering isn't a problem that you solve, it's a problem that you manage. And I feel like, the comparison, I forget, was with diabetes or something. You don't make it go away, you just manage it. And that's what I feel like successful management of it is great, is success. And yeah, so let me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't much like the language overcome either. I kind of view it as like you're embracing and like getting to know this part of yourself, and just like embracing this part of yourself, and then that's like sort of the work, if you want to call it work, is like learning to embrace this part of who you are instead of trying to stuff it away.
Yeah, exactly. Some people might find that step easy and find other steps difficult. for me, it was the easy, difficult. I know it was transformational. The acknowledgement, and not there's two separate aspects to the acknowledgement. One is it might change the actual extent of stuttering or the type of stuttering or the situations where you're stuttering. But more importantly, it comes back to this thing you said earlier, which is it changes your relationship with stuttering. And to me, that was the crucial thing. I mean, that's life changing.
How much did you used to think about stuttering, and how much do you think about it now?
That's a great question. There's this vignette of these two fish swimming around in the water, and one says to the other one, "How's the water?" And the other one says, "What's water?" And I think in the time, in the vast portion of my life before I understood more about stuttering, I think it was something that I implicitly thought about all the time. You know, if you, one of the things that I excel at, and I don't say this in a bragging way, but more in a confessional way. One of the things I excel at is word substitution. And if you're substituting words, you know, if you're constructing your sentence and realizing you're going to stutter on one word and switch to another word, you're thinking about stuttering all the time, you know. And I think it was like a what's water thing to me. Of course, I mean, I was always thinking about stuttering because every time I tried to communicate, it was there. But I never. It was more of an unconscious thing than a conscious thing. It was just part of my world, you know. Now I find I think about it explicitly sometimes because I have the language and the concepts and the tools to actually think about it rather than just suppress it. But I find that a lot of times, you know, days go by when I'm not aware of fluency issues or not thinking about stuttering at all. But now it's much more clear. I acknowledge when I'm actually thinking about it. You know, I can tell when I'm actually thinking about it. Whereas the first part of my life, I think I was always, but without even knowing about it.
Yeah, always thinking about it and probably trying to not think about it.
Yeah, just you know, banging my head against the wall, or you're resisting, suppressing thinking about it. Yeah.
Yes, so much of what has made a difference for you, it seems like, is the identity piece of things. And I think that for, you know, if there are speech pathologists out there listening to this, speech pathologists are usually trained to take care of the disfluencies, to treat the disfluencies or fix them or do something about them. And it just strikes me that we've been talking and having this conversation, and you really haven't talked about how much you stutter now, or the struggle in your speech. It seems like for you it was really about just embracing who you are.
Yeah, the I mean, I'm aware of the physical, the cutting off of oxygen and of airflow and stuff like that. And I can, uh, I can think of those kind of the physical things to, get more air, speak slowly, don't rush, blah, blah, blah. And that stuff, I mean, to me, that stuff can help on the margin. But the transformation for me was conceptual, uh, identity, what you call identity. Uh, yeah, that's been understanding the phenomenon and understanding myself and acknowledge, again, we keep coming back to acknowledging. But yeah, uh, cognitive side of it, or mental side of it, uh, for me, I think was really important. And maybe for others, uh, the physical side is more important. I don't know, but like I said, one thing I learned in the group was that there's lots of different ways to stutter, and there's lots of different ways to address it. And some things are going to work for some people and some for others.
Yeah. Bill, you also mentioned like when you hide or suppress one part of your identity, it could often result in hiding other parts of your identity. It's almost like a chain reaction. I'm curious, like once you started embracing your stuttering, how that impacted your interpersonal relationships, because you mentioned like this was also when you were going through a divorce. So let's say, for example, the relationship with your children, like how did that change when you started embracing your own identity as somebody who stutters?
That's a great question, a really great question. Talking with my kids about stuttering was just tremendous. As you mentioned earlier, it creates a bond. It creates another connection with other people, and they of course knew that I stuttered. They grew up with it. My son actually stuttered for a little while when he was about 3 or 4, uh, uh, and so it was tremendous and just totally invigorating to talk with them about it and explicitly share that part of me with them in a way that I never really had before. But that's like the major example of how this creates more bonds between people, and like how good it made me feel to talk to tell other people about stuttering.
Mm. Mm.
No, that's a great question. I should have mentioned it before.
Yeah, so talk about stuttering, everybody. That's the lesson.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you have that.
I just have one follow-up question. So you mentioned before how you used to think about stuttering all the time, and it took up a lot of space in your head, and how now you've kind of embraced your identity and you don't think about it as much. Do you feel like you have a lot more space in your head now?
Absolutely. Yes, another great question. It's again, I don't want to fall into the fallacy of that I've conquered this and something, but I I am in a different spot than I was before. And, there's sort of like once you've acknowledged it, then you can move forward. Until you've acknowledged it, you're sort of stuck suppressing what you know about yourself, and that's quite naturally is going to get in the way of everything else you want to do or be or become. So uh yeah, I do feel like it's not just dealing with stuttering, it's dealing with yourself and uh understanding yourself better.
But thank you so much, Bill. It was great to catch up and to he hear about your journey with all this.
Well, thank you both. It's great to see both of you. And as you can tell, you all like to talk about this. So I think it's good. I appreciate you having me on, and always happy to talk more.